afternoon, or god eftermiddag. Is that good? That is the extent of my Swedish, although there's little chocobollen things. I'm trying to learn how to pronounce that because I like to find them in every cafe in Stockholm. Thank you so much for being here. If I could just ask you guys to go to the beginning of the presentation, because that was the last slide. Or it's going to be a very, very short presentation. You guys hearing me up there on the balcony? I'm at the end of the presentation instead of the beginning. There we go. Thank you so much. All right, great. So I want to start by telling you a little story about my family. My family is a long line of tinkerers and fixers. My paternal grandfather, John Gould, was an elevator repairman in New York City in the mid-20th century. And he worked day in, day out, installing, fixing, maintaining elevators all throughout the city. Now, this is actually a photograph of the drill that my grandfather used for decades in his work. And it's quite a precious memento in our family. My other grandfather, Anthony Peretti, was also a builder and a fixer in the city. He was a subway repairman in New York City during that same time. In fact, it's an interesting family story that he's the reason that there's lights on the front of New York subways, because he was down in the tracks fixing a train, and there were no lights on the front of the train, so the only way you'd know one was coming was by hearing it. But when one is coming in the other direction, you go into the other tracks, you don't hear that another train is coming, and he got hit by the other train and almost got killed. Thank goodness he didn't, because I would not be here today. And it's really interesting for me to think about this, because sometimes I look back at my family history, blue-collar workers, none of them went to college. They didn't see themselves as professionals. But I actually have quite a bit in common with them, because similar to my experience as a designer, when they were doing their jobs well, nobody noticed. And just like me, they relied very heavily on tools to get their job done. Now, when my parents downsized their family, I have 8 older brothers and sisters, very big, large Catholic, Italian, and Irish family. We all kind of descended upon the house, and we were deciding who was going to take what, because my parents wanted to get rid of all their stuff. And my siblings, some of them wanted the china, and some wanted the quilts, and I wanted the drill. I loved that he used it for so many years to help keep everybody in the city safe. And I loved that he was able to use it to keep employed and keep his family fed. And I also loved how it gave him and his body superhuman strength to do things that he wouldn't otherwise been able to do. Now, designing tools like this drill have changed a lot over the years, especially now that we are designing not just physical tools, but software. And these tools can really transform our abilities as humans, our natural abilities, in really remarkable ways. But it's not just transformation at an individual level. It can transform whole industries in the way that we work and live. Now, how many of you are familiar with Mary Meeker and her annual internet report? Have folks seen that? It is absolutely a must-read for anyone in the technology industry. And a slide in her 2015 presentation particularly caught my eye. The title is, "Impact of the Internet has been extraordinary and broad, but in many ways, it's just beginning." And it's just beginning because while in the consumer market, we've been saturated with investments from venture capitalists, startups, technologies, even our own community of designers, there's many other industries who are still waiting for the cavalry to arrive. So many industries waiting for positive disruption, who have the potential to change the way that we work and live in really positive ways. Now, most of my career has been spent in that top line, developing products and services for people all over the world, to use for their own personal use and sometimes entertainment, things like Google Search and YouTube. And those have been incredibly challenging and gratifying projects to work on. But for the past 4 years, I've been working on business tools at Facebook, helping over 50 million businesses create a presence online and to develop advertising tools that help them connect with people all around the world in meaningful ways. Now, the business sector, according to this diagram, isn't doing too badly compared to some of the other industries, but there's still a pretty significant gap in the investment that we could be making. And the things that we learn designing for business can also have a really positive ripple effect in some of these other industries that are even more poorly served. But why is this all important? Well, creating elegant tools in businesses can create a lot of societal value. It can help us reduce waste. Waste of any kind drives me completely crazy. And we as humans are we're just wasting all kinds of precious resources, which should be looking to conserve and use more wisely. Things like financial capital, wasted through advertising that just doesn't work or drive real business results. Or, these funds could be used for much more valuable things like R&D or increasing wages of workers. Wasted human capital, by forcing people to use tools that are poorly designed, waste their time, make their work repetitive and uncreative and unfulfilling. And perhaps the biggest bucket of all, human attention, right? So we have so much time that we spend as humans collectively processing advertising that is irrelevant to us. And when we think about the ability to improve relevance and value in that experience, we could recoup so much of that time and have it be better spent, or even use it for other things altogether. Well-crafted, elegant tools can help to recapture all these precious assets and put them to better use. We also have an opportunity to democratize markets, giving small businesses the opportunity to compete with large corporations more effectively. Now, when we think about all the different businesses and organizations that are active in the marketplace today, it can be hard to see how small businesses can compete with them. In traditional media, this is particularly true. If you think about television, right, it's so expensive that really only the big guys can play on that playing field. But with digital video advertising and in auction-based systems like Facebook's or Google's, a variety of factors are taken into account when we're deciding what ad to place in front of which person. So things like value and relevancy to that one individual, including what ads are particularly valuable and useful at a given point in time and place, as well as the quality of the ad creative, that helps small businesses actively compete with some of the world's largest brands. Now that's exciting if you, like me, get excited about the idea of democratizing systems and media. And it can be particularly beneficial to communities that have historically been a little bit left behind in competing in the marketplace. Women business owners, owners of companies that are in underrepresented minorities. I want to share with you a video that tells a story of a business just like this, and the way that tools are allowing this business to prosper.
Jadi awalnya jualan itu nggak sengaja. Saya mulai belajar dari buku atau dari orang-orang yang lebih senior tentang proses pembuatan batik. Saya akhirnya fall in love into batik. Dari situ akhirnya saya mulai mengembangkan kain-kain tersebut menjadi baju. Saya mulai browsing, ada nggak sih komunitas orang-orang yang memang suka batik yang waktu itu saya ingin jual. Setelah ketemu orang-orangnya, saya add-in, waktu pakai personal profile, habis itu mulailah jualan dari sana. Waktu mulai aku dibantu dengan Mami dan juga ada saat itu 1 karyawan. Saat ini kita memiliki 66 orang karyawan, di mana 27 diantaranya adalah orang yang disabled. Kita mulai dari yang disutuli dan kemudian over time mulai orang-orang yang amputee, yang kehilangan tangan atau kaki, baik itu dari lahir ataupun karena kecelakaan. Saya ingin orang-orang itu bisa melihat mereka because of their ability and not from their disability. Awalnya,
I think that story of a young woman who creates a business online is able to prosper in her own right and then start to employ people with disabilities in her local community is pretty inspiring. And it's one of millions and millions of stories that are happening all over the world. It's really, really exciting to see. And it really speaks to the opportunity for investment in business tools to be able to empower small business growth and development around the world. And this is a really great segue into a third way that these tools can create positive change. Because as we help individual businesses grow and succeed by reducing waste and democratizing access to these tools, in aggregate, we can grow the economies of these communities in really serious ways. Now, a UN report estimated that in emerging markets, small to medium businesses account for 98% of all businesses in those markets, 50 to 80% of industrial employment, 50% of manufacturing employment. So empowering these small businesses can transform the lives of millions of people by creating jobs and reducing poverty. So we see this in the impact of Facebook that through a report that Deloitte published last year. It showed that in 2014 alone, Facebook's marketing and development platforms generated $227 billion of economic development. This obviously isn't our own profits. These are the profits and development that are generated by businesses using the tools. And since our founding 11 years ago, that the tools have allowed the creation of 4.5 million jobs. Now that's just Facebook. There's many, many platforms that are providing these opportunities to businesses around the world. And we can see significant impact in the communities as a result. So we can see some of the ways that this work can matter a lot if the work is done well. But what does done well mean in the business context? Well, when I joined Facebook to do business design, this was a big learning curve for me. Digital advertising is really, really complicated. And when I joined Facebook, I took that job on because I could see that it was the biggest opportunity for impact, not just at the company, but really one of the best opportunities in the industry. And while it was exciting, it was new territory for me. But it wasn't just me who was learning how to effectively design business tools. Facebook as a whole company was facing that challenge. Because unlike most enterprise companies who are trying to learn to be more human-centered, here you had an extraordinarily human-centered company who didn't actually know how to design business tools, which was kind of an interesting challenge. And we certainly, at the time, did not have a reputation of having particularly well-designed business products. It was a whole new space for us. And we wanted to do much better, but we had to learn how. So we engaged in an exploration of what great product design means in the work context. Now, certainly there's universal truths about what good design is. It needs to address a real problem that's worth solving. It needs to be easy to use, and it needs to be well crafted. We knew we wanted to raise the bar of quality for business and enterprise design, but we had to hold ourselves accountable and really articulate what that meant, because this work and the way that people use it and their relationship to the products are just different. So we defined some principles about what product quality meant in the context of business. And this is the question that my team and I have been exploring over the past 4 years as we've built a business design practice at Facebook. And we've learned a lot through trial and error. So, there's some consistent themes that arise when you're doing this kind of work, and we boiled them down to 4 main principles that I want to walk you through. And I want to share some examples of things that we have learned, some mistakes that we made, and some learnings that came out of that. We have, as all companies do that iterate in software, a checkered past of success and failure, and I think it's really important to share both of those things so that we can really be open and honest about what the learnings are. So the first is to help people learn and grow. Now, our tools should teach people not just to complete discrete tasks, create this ad campaign, but to become more effective at their jobs over time, and ultimately to help make people feel more confident and be more successful in their work. We need to think of ourselves as like a personal fitness trainer for businesses that are very in touch with exactly their fitness level and what they need to do to get to the next level. And this is particularly important in the age of automation that Susan talked about earlier, where we can do a lot of the work for people. But the fact is, a lot of that learning comes along with experimentation, and we don't want to rob them of that learning opportunity. So it's a very interesting design challenge for us. What does this look like in practice? Well, you certainly have effective inline help documentation, and proactive notifications that prompt people to take the right action at the right time, but it's also training people on the best practices that'll take their work to the next level of success. Now, in the past, Facebook's inline help for businesses provided, the standard explanations and hover text that explain the terms, but it was generic. It didn't take into account the specific person who was using it and the broad diversity of sophistication of the people who were accessing the tool. Now we have this framework that we use for smart inline help that's, I think, a really good example of this principle in practice. Internally, we call it AYMT, or actions you might take. And the goal of AYMT isn't just tooltips or hover cards that improve the clarity around a specific feature, but to offer substantial personalized guidance that actually make you smarter about advertising over time. And it takes into account the advertiser and page admin's lifetime account activity to make it much more relevant and personalized. People don't just learn about how the system works, but they figure out how to make the system work for them, which is a really important difference. The next is to build efficiency, to balance efficiency and effectiveness. Now, in the consumer space, we're often looking at the amount of time that people spend using a product as an indicator of the quality of that product. So the more engaging an app is, the more time people will spend with it, and that becomes a proxy for value. And that's why time spent is such a critical measure for a lot of consumer applications. But in the work context, maximizing time spent is an anti-goal, right? We want people to realize as much value as possible in as little time as possible. If I shave off even a small percentage of time off of a task that people are doing many, many, many times a day, that really starts to add up, and that time could be spent doing things that are way more engaging and creative and valuable, or maybe just letting people go home from work earlier. Now, in all honesty, some of the products that we've offered our customers in the past, they weren't always designed with this principle in mind. Prior to a massive redesign of a particularly complex tool, we heard one person in a research session describe the inefficiency of a particular task that they had to do many, many times a day. And to this day, it is still one of the most epic usability testing quotes I've ever seen or heard. This is hands down the most time-consuming process and the least efficient thing I do in my life. I am confident with that statement. There is no doubt in my mind this is true. People have wasted years of their lives doing this. And what strikes me about this quote is not just the frustration that you hear, but also the hopelessness. It's like, does anyone care how frustrating this is for me? When people rely on products to get their jobs done, you have to respect their time. So we study flows to streamline them as much as possible to take time off of task, but you have to be careful because if you myopically focus on efficiency, you can also create problems. If you oversimplify in the interest of efficiency, you might end up making the tool faster, but then it might create the wrong outcomes. So for instance, historically, the main Facebook ad creation interface focused heavily on the details of all of our different ad formats and where they might be placed in the right-hand side of Facebook desktop or in the feed, etc. And the flow that followed was generic, regardless of the type of business you were or what objective you were trying to achieve with your marketing dollars. Now, late in 2013, we launched a major redesign of all of the Facebook ad interfaces, and the most important change was that the ad buying process would now always start by asking the question, what is the business objective you are trying to achieve? And once we understood that objective, we could significantly streamline the flow in very smart ways. Objectives-based design focuses all of the ad creation tasks and elements on the things that are particularly relevant to what that business is trying to do, whether it's get people into their retail store or sell things online, you name it. Now, as a result, we were able to strip out all of the irrelevant and non-essential elements, increasing the efficiency of this task that some marketers do many, many times a day. Now, as with most good design decisions, this looks patently obvious in hindsight. But the fact is, this was actually pretty revelatory in online ad creation and now has been mimicked many times over, which is great. I don't think any business should actually look to be proprietary about making all businesses more successful, so we're very delighted to be copied in that sense. But we still have a lot of work to do in optimizing the experience of our ad creation tools. But by shaping the experience around the business's end goal, we're much more likely to help them achieve it. The third principle is to bring clarity to complexity. Now, business tools can be really complicated. We want to put power in the hands of businesses, but finding the right balance between simplifying it and giving access to advanced functionality is really, really hard. We can see this contrast in the design of various dashboards and transportation tools. So take a look at this concept for a BMW dashboard. It's a great example of a luxurious, streamlined consumer automotive design. You know this thing is powerful. You can almost smell it, right? That new car smell coming off the picture. The complexity and the power are hidden literally underneath the hood. But it's there, you can feel it. Success in this space is protecting people from having to interact with that complexity. But let's think about a different piloting context. And this is what an airline pilot sees when he or she steps into the cockpit. Now, this is pretty intimidating to somebody like me who has no idea how to fly an airplane. That being said, I don't know about you, but I would be pretty nervous if I was boarding a commercial jet and I looked in the cockpit and all there was an on-off switch, right? Pilots are experts, and most of the time, they don't need all these things. But sometimes, they need many of them, and as passengers, we all want them to have access. So, I'm sure this dashboard could be improved, and there's hopefully some of you in this audience today that are working on improving aviation design. It's a really interesting space. But the fact is, there's a certain level of complexity in flying an airplane, and having the right tools at your fingertips, especially in an emergency, allows you to quickly deal with any and all scenarios that might arise. Now, for Facebook advertising, our tools serve a wide variety of people, many business users that are completely new to digital advertising, and some who are new to advertising in general. And at the other end of the spectrum, you have a small but very important population of professional marketers who do this all day, every day, experts in large corporations and agencies. And they need the expert tools to get their jobs done. The challenge we face is to figure out how to take all that advanced technology and make it accessible to the people who aren't necessarily seasoned experts, while also providing experts with the access to the advanced features and functionality they need to do their work. Now, with a complex piece of UI, if you don't simplify it enough, people can't figure out how to use it. But if you oversimplify it, you sometimes actually dismantle the very value that people are looking to unlock. Really good example of this is Facebook's advertising targeting UI. Now, this is arguably one of the hardest product design problems in the whole company. We have unparalleled targeting abilities, and those abilities can help businesses of all shapes and sizes put the right message in front of the right person at the right time. But with that power comes significant complexity. And the stakes are high if we don't get it right. Because if people don't target the right audiences, it essentially undermines the entire value proposition of Facebook advertising. These businesses will have wasted their marketing dollars reaching the wrong people, and then they'll become enormously frustrated in the process, and they may understandably lose faith that Facebook advertising works. But if we do it right, and they do reach the right people, it will be the most cost-effective form of advertising that they can use. And they'll feel empowered and confident and successful, and all of the people who use Facebook products will be happier. It's a very good outcome. So as you can see from the screenshot before and after, there was a redesign where we pretty dramatically simplified the default view of targeting. We put a lot of the advanced functionality in menus where people can dig into it if they need it, but not necessarily show it up front. And this allowed the professionals to access the advanced tools without overwhelming the new folks. These changes, among others, have significantly improved the success of advertisers moving through the flow and actually reaching the right people. Now, the last principle is one that I think you're all going to get really excited about, because really it's the most scintillating of the four, and really represents the thing that designers are most excited to get into their portfolio, which is to be accurate and predictable, right? Isn't that what you guys want people to say about your design work? Is that it's accurate and predictable? The challenge here is that if we don't get this one right, the other three don't matter. And this is pretty different than in the consumer world. In most contexts, consumers are pretty tolerant of software that works 90% of the time, it's new, it's in beta, I'll just load it later when it crashes. But when you're running a business and you try to access a critical function and it doesn't work, not only is money lost, they can lose consumers, sometimes people lose their jobs, sometimes businesses fail. The stakes are very, very high. There's almost no such thing as a good surprise in business context, whereas serendipity and surprises are actually a really wonderful way to add delight to consumer experiences. So the ultimate goal is that for every action they take, every dollar they spend, the customers can know exactly what is going to happen. That means that a campaign is neither going to dramatically over or underperform based on what we predict. Now, you might ask yourself, why would you not want things to dramatically overperform? Well, what if you have a business where you are going to be driving people into a retail store to purchase a product, and you think that 150 people are going to show up, and instead 7,000 people show up, and then you have a customer service nightmare on your hands. So the gold standard is truly predictability. For example, in a different context with large advertisers, companies like Procter & Gamble and Coca-Cola, they've had a lot of trouble engaging with Facebook advertising in certain specific contexts because they do their planning a year in advance, right? So auction-based systems like Facebook's or Google's, they really are optimized for people buying in real time and getting the best price that's available in the market today. But if you're planning a year in advance, you can't set aside that budget, right? You need guarantees about how much you're going to spend to reach how many people. And that's been challenging for us to support. So recently, we introduced a new way of buying media. It's called reach and frequency. And this feature allows large brand marketers to buy ads based on what they care about most. How many people are going to see their ads? That's the reach part. And how many times will they see it? That's frequency. And then they can predict exactly how much they'll need to spend so that they can plan large campaigns. And we still have a lot of areas where we need to improve the accuracy and predictability of the products. It's a goal that we're going to work towards, but probably never fully achieve. But with every step we take, we engender more trust with our customers. So those are the 4 business design principles. And when we wrote them, we purposely kept language out that was specific to advertising because we hoped that they could be broadly useful to people working in all kinds of complex industries. And in addition to the areas that Mary Meeker talked about in her slide, all of those other industries that are really in need of quality tool development. I hope we can look back a decade from now and see this as a time when B2B and enterprise software made a massive leap forward in quality, catching up and even sometimes surpassing the quality of consumer design. If we succeed, these tools could dramatically improve the way that we work and live. It's a really exciting time to be involved in business and enterprise design. And now that I've shared some of my own motivations for doing this work and some principles that have helped shape it, I want to ask you a question. What opportunities or problems do you see in the world that you want to fix? What challenges do we face as a community, as a society, as a human race where design and technology could make a difference? Maybe it's some of the industries that Mary Meeker pointed out, but there are many other industries and ecosystems and underserved spaces where design can transform lives. Things like poverty, healthcare, in the US, our broken criminal justice system. And I'm sure that Mr. Gore, who we're going to hear about in just a few minutes, would be delighted for the brain trust in this room to turn its focus towards saving us from self-destruction on our very fragile planet. What are the changes that you want to see? How will you use your talents and your time to amplify human abilities to meet our greatest challenges? We should stop waiting for other people to fix these problems, because they're all design problems. We should all just roll up our sleeves as a design community and change the world by designing better, more elegant tools. Thank you.